Croeso i Sgwrsiau ar Arweinyddiaeth a gyflwynir gan Academi Wales. Ar ein podlediad, rydyn ni'n gwahodd gwesteion i siarad am eu taith arweinyddol ac yn myforio ar rai o'r ysbrydoliaethau a'r gwersi maen nhw'n wedi dysgu ar hyd y ffordd. Welcome to Conversations on Leadership, hosted by Academy Wales. On our podcast, we invite guests to talk about their leadership journey and reflect on some of the inspirations and lessons they've learned along the way. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Molly Dacey, and for this episode, I'd like to welcome Dr. Andy Cope. Andy specialises in positive psychology and the science of human flourishing. The reward for grinding out his PhD is that he gets to call himself a Doctor of Happiness. Andy has been described as a well-being revolutionary. His mission is to change the narrative and refocus psychology away from what's wrong with people to what's right. His messages act as a gentle nudge towards people taking charge of their own mental health. Thank you so much for joining us. To begin, if it's okay with you, I'd like to ask you just some quick fire questions, just so our listeners can get to know you a bit better.
Go for it, Mom. Go for it, yes.
So what was the last book that you read?
The last book that I read was, I write children's books, and so I still read children's books. So I've just reread Stig of the Dumb, which I last read in about 40 years ago. So yeah, it's still genius. Brilliant book.
Oh, good to know. What is the last thing that you learned?
The last thing I learned was about 10 minutes ago is to get here early, because we're currently in Lampeter setting up for a big talk. Get here early and make sure your technology works before you do a keynote. I learned that again, relearned that 10 minutes ago.
It's one to remember, isn't it? What do you think is your greatest strength?
I think I'm fairly sure that my greatest strength is my hard work. I'm a hard worker. So I'm not the most naturally gifted and talented at anything, particularly not academia, but I basically ground out a PhD through sheer bloody mindedness and hard work.
What motivates you?
What motivates me is my work motivates me. Nobody's ever asked me that before, actually. I love what I do. And it's true, it's a bit of a cliche, but if you can find a job that you would do for free and somebody pays you to do it, then that's brilliant. So my work is my hobby. That's what motivates me.
Oh, so this last question might not seem relevant now because you've said how much you love what you do. But is there another profession that you might ever want to attempt other than what you do now?
Well, too old for it now. But when I was at school, I wanted to be a professional footballer, like lads still do. Yeah. Well, girls do as well now. I mean, it's amazing how that's opened up opportunities. So yeah, a bit old now, but I mean, I support a team called Derby County that aren't very good. So I still think at age 56, I've got that glimmer of hope still. If I bring my boots on Saturday, I might get a kick about.
Thank you for answering those. It's really interesting just to get to know a bit about you personally. I do have a few more, but I'll come back to those at the end. So to start, can you just tell us about your recent research? Yeah,
so basically I'm a product of Cardiff Uni higher education. So I went to Cardiff many years ago and studied psychology, which was great, but it was all about illness and phobias and disorders, what psychology's always been about. And then I went back and did a PhD at Loughborough, and I studied positive psychology, which completely flips it on its head. So instead of looking at illness, I looked at wellness. So everybody listening to this podcast, you can all think of in your life a handful of people who've got something extra energy, extra positivity, and they create strong relationships. They go the extra mile in terms of customer service. They're great to have in the workplace. They're even better to have at home as parents. So while forever, for 150 years of psychology, we've been looking at what's wrong with people, I flipped it on its head and looked at what's right with people. Who are those slightly weird people who come alive on a Monday like everybody else comes alive on a Friday? Yeah. So three questions really. Who are the happy people? Secondly, what are they doing that allows them to feel so amazing? And thirdly, most importantly, that I'm sharing at Academy Wales today, is what might we then learn from them that we can apply to us, so we might also have that X factor. Yeah.
So based on that, our theme for this episode is motivation and empowerment.
Yeah.
And it can be fairly complicated or sometimes daunting to people in leadership roles to fully understand. But from your own personal leadership journey, can you share a time when you felt empowered, and what were the contributing factors that you remember being most influential?
Yeah, very rarely have I felt truly empowered. That's an interesting starting question, actually. I think about all the managers, so I've already alluded, I'm middle-aged, right? So I've been around, I've got some corporate miles on my clock. Lots of work for lots of different managers. There's only really been one who I felt truly empowered with. And I think I think she over-empowered me. I mean, I don't know if there is such a thing where you literally, she had more, I'll tell you what, she had more faith in me than I had in me, which is really quite amazing at the time. She thought I could do things and she let me get on with them. And she stood by me when I messed up, because sometimes part of trying to change things, you're going to make some mistakes. And we would always talk it through. I think it was before coaching had been invented, and she was just a natural coach. She brought the best out of me. She got me to believe in myself and achieve things that I never thought I could. So, yeah, hats off to her. It's the only one really where I've grown massively very quickly.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about who are the happy people, but optimism doesn't come naturally to everyone, obviously. No. And during periods of uncertainty or change, it's not surprising that some people might struggle to feel empowered. Yeah. So how do you handle situations where team members lack motivation or feel disempowered, and what steps can leaders take to kind of reignite the enthusiasm and the sense of empowerment? Yeah,
I think the first starting point to get anybody to be enthusiastic is to go first, is to genuinely fall in love with life. Right? That's really where I've been going with my positive psychology. Learning to love Mondays as much as you love Fridays, which is quite a tough thing because we've learned that Mondays are bad and Fridays. So we've got all these learned behaviours, we need to unlearn them. But I think the quickest way to tap into to relight their mojo, nobody comes to work wanting to be miserable. Nobody comes to work wanting to do a bad job. But sometimes the system stops us shining. So I think the quickest way, it ties in with my research, but also maybe common sense that isn't so much common practice, is uncovering or rediscovering people's strengths. If you can come to work and bring your full self to work, and you can find a way of bringing whatever strengths you've got into play most of the time, you will feel amazing. I think it's probably the smallest thing that you could change very quickly that would reinvigorate your team. Now, it's not always it's easy for me to say that, but quite often the world is the opposite. So what we do is we recruit people because they've got certain strengths, and then we spend 20 years trying to eliminate their weaknesses. Yeah. Whereas what we should be doing is building those strengths, acknowledging their weaknesses. And if they're letting you down, you need to do something about them. But everybody listen to this. We've all got weaknesses, and what too many organisations do and too many managers do is consistently try to get people to send you on a course to make you less bad at your weakness, where what you should be doing is looking at your strengths, send you on a course on something you're interested in and already good at. You get giant leaps of learning.
Yeah. And kind of based on organisations sometimes just sending you on a course, or in large organisations or like target-driven organisations, well-being and empowerment can sometimes be treated as a kind of tick box exercise. Yeah. So how can leaders ensure that like empowerment and motivation isn't just a word that they use, but it's a tangible like aspect of their culture?
Yeah, again, that's a huge question, and we've only got 20 minutes, haven't we? Yes, but I think it is a massive question. I think I've already alluded to allowing people to make mistakes. I think what managers need to understand, I think they kind of get it, some of them, is that there are different ways of doing a job. You don't have to do it the way that the manager does it. There's 1,000 different ways of providing world-class customer service. So I think it's allowing people to experiment with what works for them. Let me give you an example. I did a keynote at a conference. It's a really powerful example, actually, and I was a keynote speaker, but they had the employee awards after, and I was giving out some awards. And the employee of the year was somebody who'd made a huge mistake that cost the company £40,000, right? Now, rather than sacking that person, because that's a really painful mistake, they got them on stage and gave them the Employee of the Year award because they tried something, right? It hadn't worked.
Yeah.
And they'd messed up, but my gosh, they'd given it a go. And that's a really powerful message to the other 300 staff in the room going, do you know what? We are allowed to mess up. We are allowed to make mistakes. Really, really weird, because I've never seen anybody get Employee of the Year for losing the money. But a very powerful message to everybody else about, actually, we're going to stand by you. You are allowed to go away and try stuff.
Yeah. And just lastly, we've kind of spoken about how managers can do it, but it's not only our more senior leaders' responsibilities to empower colleagues. So how can leaders create a collaborative environment that encourages team members to empower each other rather than just being motivated by the leaders?
Yeah. I think you've got to find, again, it taps into my research very deeply. There's a phrase in positive psychology called collective effervescence. And I love that phrase because essentially what that means is when there's a group of people working in an empowered team, there's an energy, there's a buzz, there's a creativity. You're popping and fizzing with ideas.
Yeah.
Things are possible when there's a collective group of people all being their best at the same time. And I don't think that necessarily has to start. We talk often in organisational literature, should we be top-down culture change or bottom-up culture change? And I think it's what I call inside out. It is about everybody listening to this switching themselves on to being their best self. And if you can do that, then what that'll do is essentially my research was about what I call flourishing. When you're being your best self, then that's bigger than you. It leaks out of you. It creates upward spirals of emotion in the people around you, and there's a buzz about the place. But it starts with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all those stories, ideas and advice. But before we end, I'd like to come back to a few more quick fire questions, if that's okay. So do you or have you ever played a musical instrument? I
played piano to grade 2 when I was 9, and then I thought it was uncool. So I stopped. And then, I don't know when people are listening to this, but I've just watched Glastonbury with Elton John, and I so wish I could play the piano.
Big regret now.
Yes.
What is your favourite type of food?
I love Mexican food. I think is my favourite. Yeah, Mexican food. Oh my gosh, my mouth's watering just thinking about it.
What is your favourite noise?
My favourite noise is gentle snoring. Not big snoring, but just gentle. Somebody who's just happily asleep.
I can say I've never heard that one before. Yeah. Are you more of a morning person or a night owl?
I'm absolutely a morning person, which is why we're doing this to 9 a.m.
I know, it wasn't
because I shall be in bed at 9 p.m. Yeah.
And lastly, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
It would be the power to go back in time, I think, and just not to change anything, but just to give my 15-year-old self a bit of advice about daring to go for it.
That's a lovely one. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the experience as much as I have.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Mae un podlediad Sgwrsiau ar arweinyddiaeth ar gael trwy ein gwefan. Mae'r hawlfraint y podlediad yma yn cael ei gadw gan Llywodraeth Cymru. Our Conversations on Leadership podcast is available through our website. Copyright of this podcast is held by the Welsh Government.